thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All good.
It's
All
good to be here.
So I think what would be good to probably start off with, Monks, is give us a background, because obviously you're pretty much the head of research here.
Yep.
Right. And we have been doing some really cool planning and got some cool stuff on the horizon.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
But I think what would be cool for the listeners is just to introduce you and sort of where you come from and how you
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So, I was having to think about this morning, and I've just always loved property. Always, like even as a kid, I was the kid that I was like drawing house plans. Like before I turned 10. Like I just always loved property, but it wasn't ever encouraged that you make a career out of that. So I chose different things, but I've always had that passion for property. And then when I got into my 20s, I started renovating, because that was like something that was, there was this big movement of flipping houses and you can make heaps of money. You can't. I mean, you can.
Not how it works.
You can if you're doing really big structural renovations, but the ones that we were doing, we were going in, gutting a house, working our butts off for 8 weeks straight, and it was good. It was a good experience. I loved that side of things, but pretty soon after doing 2 of those in a very short amount of time, it was like, nah, this is too exhausting, not worth the money. So I then started working for Wealth, as I worked in the admin team first. And then I decided to go into the client manager team. And as we were just saying, it's definitely not my strong suit. Like I did do it. It was very stressful. I took it very seriously and very, but that's where I met you. And so that's cool. And I did enjoy the client side of things. I enjoyed the client side of things and seeing clients, build investments and get results out of that. But then it was pretty clear that that wasn't going to be where I was going to stay. So I moved into the research team, and that's really where I came to my element, because I think because I've loved property, I've always sort of had a sixth sense, and I've always just watched markets without knowing that I'm watching the market, et cetera, et cetera. So I love research, and from there I just continued into developing. When I started doing research for Wealth, there was no databases of where to get data. It was all manual. It was all, you had to go to all these different websites to find everything. Now there's heaps of these databases available. I am a fan of them, but I also am a fan of doing the research manually, even now, because it's just data. And if you don't know how to interpret it, and you don't know how to, like certain metrics might make something look bad, but it's actually not, and if you don't know how to do that manually, then you can come unstuck. So so I love research. I love working for Motivate in the research team, and I'm excited to see what's going to happen in the future.
Oh yeah. Well, it's a bit of a tricky one, right? Because as we've spoken about, like the property research, and I won't say industry because it's not really an industry, but like the property research like market out there is pretty dry.
Yeah.
Right. There's not a lot.
Yeah.
Yes, there are databases between your CoreLogics, microburbs, all these different, I guess sort of platforms that is accumulating some form of
data. Just a data bump. Dump basically.
But the problem is like there isn't a lot of people out there who are sort of doing this hand on hand, right?
Yeah.
Yes, there's got the guys are hotspotting on the East Coast, and they're fantastic, and
brilliant.
obviously we really like what they're doing.
Yeah.
But having said that, like that's just sort of one way of viewing data too.
Yeah.
And obviously we've spoken about this because and I guess I like to personally break it down in 2 levels, right? You got your high level macroeconomics, and then you got the micro. Macro, there are so many conflicting opinions, and it's almost, without saying this, it's almost ideological.
Yeah.
In terms of like who interprets what and what's good and what's bad. And I mean, even when I spoke to Terry Ryder from Hotspotting, he's pretty confident that the land cycles and the 18-year sort of land cycles don't really exist. They don't really think.
That surprises me,
which is wild, right?
Like that really surprises me.
Yeah. But and not to say that he's right or wrong. I guess the thing is like that's from my perspective, he's sort of using one method and just sort of saying, hey, look, here's why I don't think it works. Yeah. And then he's sort of doing something a bit different, which I think.
And he gets good results. So, he's got reasons to be firm in that.
Yeah. And it works. Whereas I think I have the attitude of why don't we try and see what everyone's doing and try and take the good parts of what everyone's doing, you know, and that's obviously what we're trying to do, right? Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But then the other part of that is it is very, very hard to find people who love doing research.
Yeah. Yeah, true.
Because, you know, it is, I believe it is a skill.
Yeah.
In the sense of being able to, you know, see the market, interpret, you know, whatever metrics you're looking at and make really good informed decisions. Yeah. And there are a lot of people who love doing that.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to, hey, here is a job in property research, it's like it's few and far between.
Yeah, there's not many people doing this kind of stuff that what I do and what we do here. Yeah. Like there's not many companies that employ a researcher specifically for this purpose. Yeah.
And
there's a real hole in the industry, in my opinion.
Oh yeah. But that is kind of crazy.
I think it shouldn't be allowed. I think it should be, if you're going to be advising people on any form of investing or property purchase, you should have to complete some kind of research course or something, you know, but there's nothing out there that, you know, that's one of my goals.
Yeah. And again, it's just, unfortunately, property investment advice and property investment isn't regulated, obviously, right? So, what it means is there is no benchmark. Yeah. There is no standard.
Yeah.
And that is fucking crazy.
I know. It really is. It blows my mind that, you know, all you have to do is get your basic real estate agent's license and you can go, yep, I can advise you on which property to buy, you know?
Yes.
No, it is. It's definitely one of my goals I'd like to revolutionize the industry and have, you know, like I work with a lot of buyers agents and you know, I've got a small group of people who I'm kind of mentoring because they want to learn more about the research, but it's a very small group of buyers agents in the industry who, you know, and and I always say to these guys, look, you know, in this market, you'll make money for your clients. Look at what the property market's doing. You can buy, you know, and you'll make money.
Anything.
And you know, you basically don't need to do research at the moment, but I've seen what happens when the market drops, and that's when clients lose money, and that's when they really find out what kind of buyer's agent you are or what kind of, you know, advisor you are.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm passionate about research and teaching, like passionate about researching for our clients, but also passionate about teaching in the industry about research because it will turn. And unfortunately, the ones that lose are the clients, and that's where it hits home for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, you and I we're obviously on the same page when it comes to property. I mean, I personally believe property is by far the best vehicle for the average person to become wealthy. By far. And
absolutely.
You know, between that and then the next lot of asset classes, the gap is huge because of leverage, right?
Yes.
Having said that, like, the industry itself has a really freaking bad name.
Yeah.
Because there's too many cowboys who don't have really any experience or any sort of formal kind of qualification to be able to give the advice that they're giving. And you know, fundamentally, you're right in the sense that, you know, if you're working with a bad buyer's agent, and when I say a bad buyer's agent, it doesn't have to be a buyer's agent. It could be anyone who's giving that sort of advice. Like when the market does turn, and we've seen this right between 2012 to 2018, roughly in Perth, like it was. Especially in you know 15, 16, and 17, when we had that oversupply of rentals here, like there were houses and streets with houses that were vacant for months on end, right? And there was just too many houses, not enough people. And obviously, right now the market's the opposite, but the market will turn. It always does.
Exactly.
And the reality is, it's like these guys who are operating now, who are just doing the quick jobs just to get their clients into a house. Like they're the ones who are actually making a mess for us in the future. Yes. And they're like
that give the industry a bad name.
100%. We like as a part of like we got to kind of clean this shit up. Yeah. You know, and this is obviously one of the reasons why we're actually doing this is because, you know, we sort of want people to know that doing research isn't really that difficult. Like, yes, it helps to have people who
you can learn it. It's a skill.
Exactly.
You learn it.
Right. But at the same time, it's like these kind of conversations actually give our clients and our listeners the substance of know what to look for and know what to avoid. So it's like just by default, we are actually improving things, which is great.
Yeah.
But you're right in the sense that like, you've got these, and I see it, right? You've got these buyer's agents who are completing these 6 to 8 week courses.
Yeah.
So, in roughly 3 months' time, they're now giving people advice.
Yeah.
And they haven't seen the downturns.
No.
They haven't seen, and they're not really aware of risk and what the risks are and how to mitigate the risks for clients and what measures to put in for the clients to make sure that their risk is mitigated. And it's like they're partnering up with these real estate companies, and as soon as a real estate company has a listing for sale, it's like, the buyers, I found a really good property here. It's like, no, you haven't found a really good property.
No.
You've just got a real estate agent that you're a mate with who's just linking you, and it's just...
And they're good salesmen.
Yeah.
And this is where people get caught, I think, is that, I'm a huge fan of the sales team. Like, it's essential for business. It's, they are the most important part of your business. But you do still get those salesmen out there who, ethically, they don't really mind what they sell. They just want to complete the sale, and that's, something that's where I'd like to see it regulated. That, yes, you can definitely be a salesman, but make sure you've got the research backing to make sure you're taking care of your client.
Well, because, mate, let's say we were to wave a magic wand and fix the problem, right? What do you think would need to be the minimum? So let's just say, for example, right?
Good question.
You've got certain qualifications.
Yeah.
Right. Now, it's not just about getting a sales registration through REWA or even your real estate license for that matter.
Yeah.
Because, when you do your Cert 4, your diploma in real estate, you're taught how to transact.
Yes. There's nothing about research in any of that.
No. You're not taught about risks.
No.
You're not taught about, financing and...
Or even, sorry to interrupt, but even taking a step back, your basic real estate Cert 4 is all about selling and managing real estate. There's actually no
That's right.
formal qualification now for buyer's agents, and there's a huge movement there's a huge population of buyer's agents coming through. That there's no actual formal qualification for that. So that's probably something that will come through in the next 10 to 15 years, I'd say.
Hopefully.
And I'd like to see part of that as to be the research. But like in terms of the minimum, I don't know what that would look like. Like, I think, I'd have to explore that. I mean, I don't think it's extremely hard. I think it could be a really easy, enjoyable course that you could complete. And I actually think it's a really good sales tool, because if your clients know that you've got research backing, they automatically relax and they trust you.
Yeah.
So I don't think it would be hard, like, to bring this into the industry.
No. I mean, I like to use Pippa as a good example of this. Because, I mean, look, obviously property investment is not regulated, which means that you technically don't need any formal qualification. And again, that's broken, right? That's obviously that doesn't work. But then you go to someone like Pippa, so the Property Investment Professionals of Australia. Now, they have the QPIA course. So I did that many years ago. In that, there's essentially, ironically, there was a troll the other day on one of our pages.
On the Motivate page?
Yeah, and I kind of replied to it, said, hey, look, we are with Pippa, and this is sort of the difference, right? But, fundamentally, there was essentially 4 points. So firstly, in order to be a member of Pippa, you've got to complete the course, right? So that, in terms of a qualification, right now would be the gold standard for property investment.
And what does that cover? Does it cover?
It covers everything, really.
Yeah.
I mean, so the big thing is, types of property. I'll give you my login so you can have a look at the actual modules.
Yeah.
That was one of the things I was showing yesterday.
Yeah.
But the first thing is qualification. And I do think that if we were to improve the industry and fix things, there would need to be a module within that program about research.
Yeah, perfect.
Because it wasn't a lot about research. Yes, there was about the metrics, the pull and pull mechanics, the leading and lagging indicators, and all the different things.
That's something at least.
Well, it's more than what's out there. You know what I mean? Which is great. The second thing you need to do once you've completed the course to actually be a member of Pippa, you have to always work in your client's best interest. So the fact that that's just not by default the first fucking law is insane.
It's insane.
Right?
It's so insane.
But again, it's because there are a lot of companies out there.
But it's also, how do you monitor that? And how do you... hold people to.
So the finance industry has this as well. So as a finance broker, like we have to, there's obviously the obligations that Motivate Finance are under. It's like we have to always work within the client's best interest. Now, what that means, every meeting we've got to have notes and saved in the client's file.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yep.
When, as a finance broker, when we're presenting the bank's options, we have to have like the top 5 options listed side by side. This is the rate, this is the fees, this is the cost, blah, blah, blah. It's all on a table. And then it's literally from first all the way through to fifth.
Yep.
So it's like when we're presenting that to a client, it's black and white. Like this is your number 1 best option. This is number 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah.
So again, having a framework like that when you're providing property investment advice, that should be the norm. And it's just, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And once again, it's this is just using what the finance industry is doing and then bringing it over to what property investment advice is doing, which is really the same frigging thing.
Yeah.
When you think about it.
Yes.
So the second thing is you got to work within your client's best interest.
Yeah.
Now, the issue with the industry is the fact that you've got companies out there that market themselves as wealth creation companies or a property investment company, but then they only offer house land packages, or they only offer established property. They only offer one company, like they just do co-living properties.
Yeah.
But it's like
that's not wealth creation.
Well, not just that, but
it's not, but it's not in the client's best interest because every client's different.
100%, right? So what that company is like you're just selling one type of property investment strategy, which means you can't really say you're a property investment company because it's almost like, going to a doctor and all that doctor prescribes is one type of antibiotic.
Yeah.
And it's like if you go to him for something different and he's just going to prescribe that one antibiotic, it's like
that's not in your best
interest.
interest.
You're not really a doctor.
Yeah.
You're just trying to sell that drug.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this fundamentally is one of the reasons why I think that a lot of companies who are in this property space or the investment space, they don't do the PIPA course because the way that company is structured, by default, they can't actually work in the client's best interest. And once again, this is fucking insanity.
That's insane.
But this is the norm. All right?
Yeah.
The third thing, you have to disclose your fees and commissions.
Yeah.
So once again,
so you don't have to do that unless you've done the PIPA course.
Well, so okay. Technically speaking, because property investment advice is not regulated, there's no oversight.
Yeah.
So whether you do or whether you don't, there is no regulator that can come in and say, hey, you've been doing the wrong thing. So there's no repercussions. And therefore, when there is no repercussions, you have cowboys that thrive because they can just go and do this shit, as we've spoken about. There are buyer's agents on the East Coast that hit us up and say, hey, I know you guys know a lot about, Perth and blah, blah, blah. Can you go find us a property and then load us in a $70,000 commission? And it's like, fuck no. Like, no. But the problem, because they're getting away with this shit on the East Coast because, this industry's kind of thrived a lot more over there than it has over here. It's kind of the standard over there.
Yeah, that's mental.
Like, disclosing your fees commissions, once again, should be by default a standard no matter what.
But that in itself, it's like you're marketing yourself as like a wealth creation company and you're working for your client, yet you're taking $70,000 to $80,000 per deal. That's not creating wealth for them. That's just taking the piss. Like,
that's creating wealth for you.
That is,
yeah.
I just can't even get on board with that.
Yeah. So one of the things that people really have to wrap their head around is in property, you can't escape commission. You just can't.
Yeah.
Now, whether you're selling a property, there's a commission to the real estate agent.
Yeah.
Right? Whether you're buying a property, there's a commission to the buyer's. Unless you're doing a private sale to someone that there's always going to be some kind of commission.
And that's appropriate because there's a service being given and that service needs to be paid for.
Of course. But at the same time, like while the standard is that there is a commission, and it's no different to cars, it's no different to some other industries, right? The point is like there does need to be some kind of guardrail.
Yes.
For clients, right?
Yeah.
And there was a company many years ago on the East Coast. I won't mention them because I don't want to get
Yeah, no.
Cease and desist letter. But, long story short, these guys were one of those clubs. So you join them as a they were a property club, and then the property club was it's like $15,000 to become a member, and then it gives you like exclusive rights to the properties that they've got access to. Now the properties they got access to are all bullshit developer stock that developers can't sell. So they're just giving it. So it's like they're kind of fast tracking in, and then they load up $60,000 comms in them, and then. This was really, really prevalent in the noughties, where really before that kind of 2013, like before the GFC.
Yeah.
And they were getting away with it.
Free for all.
It was free for all, right? Yeah. And then obviously post GFC, the banks were obviously, they were caught doing some bad shit.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so they had like a bit of a snapback effect, and so they kind of overcorrected.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, valuations were coming in low on every freaking deal, right? But again, it was a reaction from the banks and bank valuers, because what they found out was prior to the GFC, there was companies on the East Coast just getting away with $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 commissions.
Yeah.
So you're selling properties that are way overpriced in the market.
Yeah.
In shit areas that the sellers themselves can't sell, hence why it's passed on to you. And then you're charging people like $15,000 non-refundable just so you could sell it to them. Like, if there is a fucking scam in this world, like that's a freaking scam. And just so it's just when it thrives.
And it's also the knock-on effect is also like the property industry in Australia is strong. Like it's not going to change.
It's huge.
But you hear so many people have had bad experiences with property, and that's why, you know, and it's like for someone like ourselves who love property and, it's a real shame because it's such an exciting thing to be a part of, and it's such an Australian dream to be a part of the property industry, and there's all these people out there who've just been burnt by these companies that do the wrong thing, you know, and it's hard. Like, I get it. Like, there's people who come back and they're like, no, I want to give it another go, but it's hard to trust and it's hard to find the right advice. And I always said, when we did see that downturn and like people that I knew lost a lot of money, one person I knew went bankrupt, like they couldn't get their properties rented, and one of them said to me, yeah, but we made the decision. I said, yes, but in this industry, unless you know what you're doing, you actually don't know what the decision you're making is.
Correct.
Like, unless there's so many moving parts in this industry and there's so many different people, you can't possibly understand all of that in the short amount of time that it takes for you to go from your decision to invest. I mean, people do. Like, if you're really kind of research focused and you want to do the deep dive, like, you'll have a good understanding. But the general person, the reason they come to a buyer's agent is because they're time poor. Yeah. They want someone to take care of it for them. And it just breaks my heart that there's companies out there who don't take care of that. Yeah. And in fact do the opposite.
Well, so, the problem is, Mark, it's the majority of them. That's the thing. And this is the thing that like, this is fundamentally why the industry is broken. Mm. And picture this, right? Imagine, the healthcare industry, right? Imagine most of the hospitals were corrupt.
Yeah.
Like, there would be riots in the streets.
Yeah. Oh, gotcha.
Like, if we knew that the majority of the hospitals in WA were just fundamentally just totally fucked.
Yeah.
Like, there would be like serious government intervention. Yeah. To like, and it would be the first priority, right? Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, health is a lot more important than, say, property and money. Granted, 100% understand that. But we are, today in 2025, we are standing here in an industry where the overwhelming majority of operators and companies out there are fundamentally corrupt.
Yes. I never can do his laugh.
It's just, it's
there's no solution on the horizon.
Well, look.
I mean,
We're trying.
We're doing our bit, yeah.
But it's just, it's wild,
Give us 20 years, yeah.
Yeah, but then, with Pippa, so the third, sorry, I think the third or fourth thing is risk, right? So, and this is a really big part of the actual course itself. It's like, you as the advisor, the most important thing for you to be doing is ensuring your clients are aware of the risks of what they're doing, right?
Yes.
Now, once again, if you've got a buyer's agent who's been a buyer's agent for 3 weeks, 3 months ago, he was a refrigeration mechanic.
Yep.
Like, you don't know what the risks of property are. You haven't seen cycles. No. You haven't seen, and sure, yes, there are interest rate variabilities, but you haven't seen when interest rates have increased. You know, the overall supply and demand of the market, there's an oversupply of houses. You know, people having to drop rents, 30, 40, 50% just to get the house rented.
Yeah.
And it's like, there are multiple things that are at play. And unless you've seen upturns, downturns, and you've really got a really comprehensive understanding, so you're not going to know what the risks are.
Yeah.
Let alone what to do about the risk and how to mitigate them.
Yeah.
And this fundamentally, and look, I personally believe investing's not about making money. It's about mitigating risk over time because the markets will make you money.
Yep.
And the amount of people who have been millionaires and then bankrupt, pointless.
Yeah.
Absolutely pointless.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not about making money. It's about consistently mitigating risk over time.
Yeah.
And like with Murphy's Law, shit happens. And the shit you don't think is going to happen, I promise it will happen. Every time.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just how it works, right? But you know, like that would be a good place to start as like, this is now the standard.
Yes.
See, the only problem is, and one of the reasons why I don't think that, well, and again, this is a personal opinion, total assumption here. The reason why I don't think that the government has the ability to regulate the property investment advice industry or the property investment industry is because it would almost immediately stop builders' new sales. Because as a builder or as a house and land sales rep or a sales rep for a builder, again, you don't need qualifications.
Yeah.
Yet, almost by default, they're giving property investment advice.
Yeah.
So it's almost, let's just say, for example, someone walks through a display home and you're a sales rep, right? If I say to you, hey, look, I'm looking to build a house and I'd love to build in this area and that, and this is going to be for investment property. If you have any opinion or comment, you're now providing investment advice.
Yeah, exactly.
Just by default.
Even if you say, oh, I think you should go this suburb over this suburb.
Straight away.
That's advice. Yeah.
That's advice.
Yeah.
Because now what you're doing is you're essentially opposing your opinion, and you may not have any qualification or any sort of education to do that, right? And unfortunately, this is a big chunk of that space. You know, now if they were to turn around and say, "Hey, look, we're going to regulate property investment advice," I would imagine that the first thing would need to happen is some kind of qualification for guys who are doing that.
Yeah.
Builders may not have the capacity to do that.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? So like that I can see
is a potential.
Well, I can see why it's a barrier. And look, I think there are things you can do about it, but putting your head in the sand and just letting things carry on the way they are, I don't think is the way to go.
I think there should be steps towards this, like, you know, first of all, some kind of research course. And then, some kind of qualification. And you can give people, 5 years or something over the next 5 years to kind of get yourself upskilled. And, you know, it's not hard, but Well,
the other thing too, it's like if you are working in that industry, say, and you're working for a builder, like you've got most of the, like if you've been in that role for, let's just say 12 months, you've got most of the necessary skills to be able to complete any kind of qualification properly. Like it's not like you are getting that sort of on the job training, but this is all about how can we essentially raise the standard so that we're effectively cleaning up the industry.
Yeah. But I mean, you have to do your CPE anyway. Like, so, you know, why not have this be part of that? Yeah. You know, like,
could be,
you know, like completing research modules or something, or, you know, just something, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's wild. It's,
there's definitely, it'll be interesting to see what happens anyway. Like, I'd like to see a change in the industry, whether or not it happens or not. But I think the takeaway is for clients, you know, do your research into who you're working with.
Yeah.
You know, have they done the PEPA course?
Yeah.
You know, and that's what I'd like to see. But unfortunately, again, unless you've been in the industry and you know what you're looking for, you don't know what to look for.
Yeah.
You know, it's
hard.
So
it is hard.
And that's like, I remember before I started working with you, one of my first questions was, what's your fallover rate? Like, how do you take care of your clients? Like all this kind of stuff. Because and that's one of the reasons I'm really happy working here, because you put your clients first and foremost every single time. And it will show in the long run, because your company will have the longevity because your clients come back. Yep. Whereas these cowboys, as soon as they get a downturn, guaranteed they'll be off the map.
Wipe their hands and they run.
Yeah.
And
off they go, do something else.
So, and again, it's wrong. But, you know, all we can do is set the right example. And we got to be the change we want to see.
Yes.
Really.
Yes.
And that's when I started this that was the main reason why I started it in the first place, is because I've seen what doesn't work. And, if we're going to do this, we're doing this right.
Yeah.
Because it can be done right, and you can win by doing it right, and we can prove that.
Yeah.
And here we are.
And I think you already are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, I know you already are.
Yeah.
You've got clients coming back, and, everyone's happy.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but again, it's just, you have to put clients first.
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, we just got to keep fighting that good fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
But look, let's get into some research, because this is, I guess, what some clients
rant over.
really, my rant's done.
It's my rant too.
Yeah. Oh man, it happens early. Part of the game.
Yeah.
So I guess firstly, let's start with the national median.
Yes.
Right, and really what's going on the overall.
Yep.
Now, so the national median house price is obviously the middle number of every transaction that takes place in the country.
Yeah.
All right. So Perth, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Darwin, you name it, all into one pot.
Mm-hmm.
What is the median price of the country?
So for the last quarter, so we're just working up to the December quarter, it was 837.
Right.
So amongst that, Melbourne's sitting at 772 at the moment.
Right.
Thousand. So Melbourne's really low.
Yeah.
Perth's sitting at 809,000. Adelaide's 819.
Cool.
Brisbane's 890,000 at the moment.
Got it.
And then Sydney's sitting at 1.193 million.
Yeah.
So obviously a big difference there. But yeah, that's really interesting, because Melbourne is very depressed. Like, I don't really track the other ones because we don't consider those at the moment for our clients.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Melbourne's not performing well at all, whereas Perth and Brisbane's performing extremely well, but coming in second. So that's exciting. We did see the last month there was a stagnation, so there was no growth or decline in the market.
And that's the median?
Australia-wide, in the median, yep.
Median, cool.
The December quarter, though, there was a decrease of 0.1% decline in the market. So Australia-wide, we are seeing a bit more of the stagnation happening. But, the Christmas period, all that kind of stuff, you kind of have to track that a little bit later on to see what's really happening. But yeah, that's what's happening with the median. The inflation, we've seen a correction there, so it's well within the target rate of 2 to 3%, has been for a few months now. So we should see, what they're saying is the big four banks are now saying that next time the RBA meets in, I think, is it next week or the week after?
18th of
Feb.
2 weeks.
Everyone's waiting with bated breath. So yeah, they reckon that they will reduce it by 25 basis points, which will be a very welcome change, because that should translate into an interest rate cut for people. So pros and cons to that. I think pros, it should become a bit more affordable for people with a current mortgage, if you're on a variable rate mortgage. I think it will spark more investor activity around the country. So yeah, amazing for the market. Affordability wise, I think it's gonna, we're already well behind the house that we need. With the immigration coming in, population. I was looking at the figures this morning, because I track all this each month. So the population increase for the December quarter was 2.1%. So it is slightly down. March it was 2.3%.
Yep.
But it's still obviously a significant increase each quarter. So we're not showing any signs of decreasing population, and it is mainly overseas immigration.
Yeah. Well,
so
it looks like overseas is about 81% last I checked.
Yeah.
Which is
massive. It's massive. So we're seeing a net decline in birth rates, like natural increase. But the overseas immigration is, we're still playing catch up from COVID when we didn't have hardly any, overseas immigration. But yeah, I was looking, so it's most likely Liberals will be elected this year at the federal election. Yep, hopefully. Yeah. So it's not going to politics, but, the budget needs a bit of sorting out, which is generally what the Liberals do. I was having a look at their policies, and affordability, obviously housing affordability, living costs, that kind of thing is probably their biggest election promise. I think that's the kind of the thing on everyone's lips at the moment. They are going to look at the immigration stuff to kind of help with affordability. Realistically, I don't think they're going to be able to do anything because we've already got a construction shortage. The workers need to come from somewhere. There's industries that are struggling. So I don't see the immigration population changing. And building approvals for the December quarter we're only building about 45,000 houses a quarter Australia-wide.
That's
which is insane. So that works out to be 180,000 houses a year Australia-wide, which is so the government wants to build 1.2 million houses, like good houses for people to live in, from July last year through till July 29. We're at those rates, we're on track to build 900,000 houses.
Yeah.
Which is, 300,000 houses short of what the target is. Yeah. And that's not even really taking into account the massive population growth we're having. So the market's only going to get better in Australia. I mean, for investors.
Yeah. And this is, I guess, kind of the double-sided coin, because it's better for investors, worse socially.
Yes.
Because it's more homeless.
Yes.
Less people able to go and afford their own home. And I'm as someone who lives in a house, it's hard for everybody.
Yes.
However,
it's tricky.
If you're an investor, and obviously this show's catered to investors and people who want to invest, here's the way I think about it. It's, let's just say, for example, you've got your own home, right? Or let's just say you don't even have a home, but you want to go buy a home, right? Like, as the market continues to keep moving away from you, it's just going to get harder and harder.
Yeah.
Because, like you're saying, like the population, even if they do stop it next year, let's just say that, Pauline Hanson comes and gets all the power in the world in Australia, and she just stops immigration.
Yeah.
How long? 8 months?
Yeah.
Before she has to turn it back on?
Yeah, exactly.
Because we fucking need people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, long term, you think about countries like China, India. Indonesia is a huge one, where they've got a population of just over 1 billion people on a tiny little landmass. We are the most sparsely populated country in the world, right? And we're also a Western developed world, which means we've got a very strong economy. Like, just by default, we're going to have some of the largest population growth over the next 100 years because we can fit way more people in here.
And we're such a livable country.
Very much.
And it's such a good lifestyle here. It's so attractive for overseas students. It's, why wouldn't you want to live
in Australia? Paradise.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah.
It's total paradise.
And again, I've been to the Middle East.
Yeah.
When I was in the Navy. So I 100% understand people leaving those countries to come here. Totally.
Absolutely.
Now, obviously, we don't want to have what the US is going through with the southern border and just unchecked population growth, right? We need to make sure that it's done properly.
Yes.
And there's, town planning is done properly, and the infrastructure, planning is done properly, because even
we don't want to ruin paradise.
Well, I mean, here's an anecdotal example. I went to Scarborough on Saturday morning to go to the beach. Dumbest decision I've ever made.
Oh, really?
I used to live in Scarborough, right? Okay. So I used to be able to walk to the beach. And so, just a dumb idea, catching up with some mates, let's go catch up at Scarborough at 9 o'clock in the morning. We went down from Brighton Beach all the way up through North Scarborough. Then we had to go up to Trigg, and then we had to go all the way back down to City Beach. Couldn't find parking anywhere.
Oh, you're joking. Yeah.
But it's like, we're talking like multiple beaches.
Yeah.
Every car park is full. You're in the car park for 25 minutes because it's literally, you're at a standstill.
Yeah.
With that many vehicles. And it's like,
oh, that's frustrating.
This is a great example of the government allowing people to flood in without doing any planning. And this is one of the negatives to this, is the fact that you are actually going to destroy our way of life if you're not paying attention to this shit.
Yeah.
And it's, I'm an immigrant. I came here when I was 6 from America, right? So definitely pro-immigration. But we've got to make sure that we're actually planning for it and have the capacity to do it.
Yeah.
And right now, bringing in 500,000 people in the country and building 100,000 homes, that is not taking care of it.
No. And it's unfortunately, the lower income earners, Australian or anyone who's a low-income earner is suffering at the moment.
Yeah.
But it's funny because I was reading a report, I think last year, by Michael Yardney. He's a property commenter. Very good. I follow his stuff really closely. And he wrote a report, and it was really interesting. He said that the answer to affordability isn't stopping immigration. It isn't lowering the interest rates. It isn't stopping investor. It's not stopping negative gearing. It's improving employment and improving wages and improving that way. And it's right, because we are we're not unaffordable, for the majority of people. It's the lower income earners and the people who don't earn that what should be earning in Australia to live here. So that's what the energy needs to go into, is to improving their employment situation, improving their income. I found that really interesting, because I think this is one of the other things about property investing, is that the media, people don't understand that the media is not in the business of reporting truth sometimes. They're in the business of selling newspapers. So anything that's going to attract attention, and everybody loves to, everybody thinks that they know what's happening in the property market because of what the media says. And it's just not accurate sometimes, and there is this big housing affordability, and it fuels this really, it's just a misconception that, it's not accurate of what's going on in Australia. So I did like that report that Michael Yardney came up with, because I think if we focus on solving an issue rather by taking things away, it's never going to be the solution. We need to look at it. Why have we got this issue in the first place? What do we need to do in terms of fixing it at the base level? Yeah.
And just on that, so this is one of the links I really like using. What this is talking about is housing affordability. And what the metric is. And see, the problem with housing affordability, the term has been muddied a little bit. Right. Again, the media. Thanks, media. And politicians ranting about this, particularly on the left.
And that's the other thing. Politicians are not always in the business of doing what's best. They're in the business of getting re-elected. So they will tell the population what is going to get them elected, basically. And I think being aware of that is also a good thing.
So housing affordability right now kind of has two different definitions because of, again, it's been muddied. Traditionally, it was a term used for you have the median house and you got the median wage. How much proportion of your wage goes to paying that repayment? Now, the problem with that metric, and the reason why I don't like that metric, there are a bunch of variables. Because things like interest rates change that straight away. And so, what was deemed affordable pre-COVID with interest rates, or actually, sorry, during COVID when interest rates got reduced down to like that 2.5%, 3%. Versus where they are today at 6.5%. It's like just by the banks increasing the interest rates, you've halved housing affordability. So like that metric is bullshit. We can't really rely on it because it just doesn't make sense. What I think is more accurate is median wage to what the median price is, because that's something that's definitive. And isn't directly impacted by any of these variables that kind of change. But right now, and I like using this website because it's got every major city around the world. Right now, Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, I hope I said that right, the price to income ratio is 52.9 times.
Wow.
So, but you got to remember, in Ethiopia, so we're talking about people earning almost nothing. But then the median house price is 52 times what they're earning. So, of course, it's way more unaffordable.
So most of the population can't afford a house.
Well, exactly. Right. Then you got obviously China. I mean, Beijing's number 3, Shanghai's number 4. The thing to keep in context though is like you look at the top. Let's just say look at the top 20 cities. Right, so Ethiopia, China, Nepal, Iran, Vietnam, China, Taiwan, Thailand, China, Cambodia, China, India, South Korea, Philippines, Vietnam, China, Algeria, Israel. Right, so that top 20, well, we're talking from 52 times down to sort of 25 times. 22 times. Right. The common theme with all of those cities, they have massive populations as compared to infrastructure. I mean, you've got huge populations of people trying to fight over a limited supply of infrastructure. Well, no wonder why it's 25 times.
Yes. Yeah, there's so much demand. Yeah.
Now, we think about, say, Sydney, and this is our most expensive city in the country. Sydney is 12.4 times. Right, so if we come down here, 12.4. So Sydney is the equal 110th most unaffordable city in the world.
Yeah.
So for politicians to sit on the East Coast and tell me that Australia has the most unaffordable real estate, you need to take your head.
I call bullshit.
Like, it is nonsense. It is absolute nonsense. But you're right in the sense that that's what's it's a popular term that's been it's a debate issue now. It's not a fact. No.
It's not a
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And to our defense, like, the current trajectory that we're on is actually making things more unaffordable with the population versus infrastructure. But and I think, speaking to what Mark Wiarden is saying, it's like, if we focus on, say, employment, increasing the employment, median wages and things like that, and focusing on, because the other thing too with employment, it's not just about wage.
No.
Because you got things, I mean, even now, like, we're paying 11% super now. So there's slightly more benefit. Obviously, the ancillary entitlements between your leaves and all that sort of stuff. Like, there's other things that we've done that most other countries don't offer.
It also boosts the economy as well. So you get that knock-on effect. If you increase employment and wages, there's more spending in the economy. Everything strengthens.
Everything strengthens.
Yeah.
And this is the argument between, and sorry to get into politics, but between the left and the right. Most people don't understand the difference. And they think, this guy's popular, or I like this guy, therefore I'm going to vote for this guy.
Yeah.
The main difference between the left and the right is the left are generally socialist, the right are generally capitalist.
Yep.
All that means, the left are always going to be pulling towards bigger government and the government taking things over and fixing it for the people.
Yep.
Right? So free healthcare, free X, Y, and Z.
And the left in Australia would be Labor.
Right? So by default, the decision making is always going to be, how can we expand government's help, expand government?
Yep.
But what happens when we continuously go down the road is it does head towards communism, where the government just ends up having to take over all ownership of everything, and then
more government spending, more budget issues.
They expand, they get bigger.
Yeah.
They're able to employ more, offer more services, do this. Oh, hang on, property, the whole property market's fucked. Well, we're going to have to go take and reclaim all the properties and issue it out evenly, right?
Yeah.
So that's obviously a major problem for what we're doing, right? Whereas liberals are more of your right wing, so they're generally more capitalist.
Yeah.
Now, capitalist means that the people have the ownership.
Yes.
See, and this is really important, because I was having this chat to my sister a little while ago, actually at Christmas, and she was kind of saying, oh, but isn't Labor more for the people, and the right wing, so liberal, they're more for businesses and big businesses. Well, it's like, well, who owns the businesses?
Yeah.
The people. And
who offers employment? It's the businesses. Right. Who employs you as a person?
Right.
It's the businesses.
Yeah. And fundamentally, anyone can start a business. Now, not everyone can do it, but anyone can do it. And so really the big distinction is public ownership on the left versus private ownership on the right.
Yeah.
Now, at the end of the day, because we are a property investment company, almost by default, we kind of have to be more right-wing. Yeah. When it comes, economically, right? And, when people vote, and this is not to tell people how to vote, right? But, when people vote and they are investors, if you are voting left, it's like, you got to remember that you're voting towards the government owning everything and us owning nothing as a people.
Yep.
Right? And when you look at communist countries, and there's a couple of them out there, they ain't doing great.
No. Communism's great in theory, I think, but it's never actually worked in reality.
Correct.
And there's lots of history of that. Yeah.
Correct. But this is I guess sort of the problem, and this is obviously what we've seen in Victoria. Because, fundamentally the Victorian property market has suffered pretty much purely because of left-wing government decisions.
Yeah.
And it's left-wing disincentivizing investment, because they're heading towards trying to have big government, bigger control, bigger hate to say this word, bigger power.
Yeah. Well, I mean, during COVID, I think the reason Melbourne suffered so much is because during COVID, obviously the Melbourne government decisions were quite severe compared to the rest of the country. I mean, a whole of Australia was quite severe compared to the rest of the world, but Melbourne especially was hit pretty hard with their lockdown laws, etc. And what actually happened was they had locals move away from Melbourne. A lot of people moved up to Brisbane just for the better lifestyle. So they've had net population increase, but only due to immigration.
Yep.
So the cultures, from what I hear, is changing in Melbourne.
Yep.
And yeah, they disincentivise to try and tax their way out of the debt that they created, which is what Labor does, in my opinion.
Generally, yeah.
Yeah, they're trying to tax their way out of it. So they're increasing tax for investors. They're doing all sorts of things. So yeah, it's a shame for Melbourne because, what was, once number 2 as the most livable city in the world is not currently like that. So I'm looking forward to when there's a change of government to see what happens there. It will shift. I mean, it's Melbourne. Yeah. It's still a beautiful place. It's still a really beautiful, livable city. I'm really interested in looking at Melbourne this year. I think most people who are in the investment space are watching Melbourne very closely. It's risky. You have to do your research and make sure you know where to go. But just the affordability there is unbelievable. It's Melbourne, you know. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, you brought up an interesting point. The left-wing government in Labor increased taxes, but they did it on property investment. So things like commercial, stamp duties, your land taxes, etc. So once again, it's like they're increasing taxes to get themselves out of the poor decision making that they make, right? So in other words, the government fucked up, the people now got to pay for it. And now the property market is suffering because people are now vacating because of what they did, right? Now, interestingly, and hate to talk about this guy right now because I'm pissed off with him, but Donald Trump got elected recently.
Yes.
Right? Now, one of the things that he did, now obviously he's right-wing, so he's more capitalist, obviously, he's a billionaire. But one of the things he was talking about the budget deficit, right, because they're obviously in trillions of dollars worth of debt.
Yep.
What he was talking about is instead of increasing taxes, what he wants to do is increase the overall GDP. And in other words, he wants to free up the economy.
Exactly.
Get the economy pumping way bigger and really incentivize private investment so that the overall value and the overall GDP is way higher than what the debt is. And therefore the debt just by default
takes care of itself.
Well, you're shrinking the debt.
Yeah.
So it's like increased taxes, people suffer.
Yep.
Whereas what his attitude is, and this is generally why I'm a lot more capitalistic when it comes to the economy. But he now wants to invest in the economy, increase employment, and do a lot of really beneficial things to the overall economy. So he doesn't have to increase taxes. But like his strategy is to dwarf the debt, and it's like that's so much better.
Yeah.
That if Labor government in Victoria had have done that instead, like they wouldn't be suffering the way they're suffering.
Yeah.
And once again, when I say suffering, this is good for us as investors because now Victoria has become the cheapest major city.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's a great opportunity. Like once it is time to get in there, it's a great opportunity to get a Melbourne property as long as it's long term. It's not a short term investment, it's a long term investment at this stage. Yeah.
Cool. So let's go through city by city. So let's talk about Sydney.
Yeah.
Because Sydney is one of those ones that has been booming out of control over the last decade.
Yeah.
So they went from 609,000 median in 2010 to 2018 they hit 1.2 million. All right. So from 2018 to today in 2025, so talking 7 years later, they've not really done a lot.
No.
So
that's to be expected after you've had a big boom. You're always going to get that correction, that stagnation.
Yeah. Now, obviously, during COVID, when the government offered the grants and then artificially lowered the interest rate to help people, in that time, it kind of artificially stimulated Sydney at the same time when it probably should have been declining. Now, for what I can see in my personal view is I think Sydney will probably continue to decline a little bit for a little bit longer.
Yeah, I think so.
What are you thinking?
Look, to be honest, I'm not that well versed in Sydney just because for our investors we don't really do anything in Sydney at this stage. We haven't up until now. So it's not one that I watch as closely as, say, Brisbane, Perth and Adelaide. But yeah, I think given that you've got lots of other opportunity around the country for investors specifically, like, I mean, Sydney's always going to be an attraction for overseas immigration. The size of Sydney is more comparable with your big cities around the world. And so people who are coming from those cities are going to, be more like, I mean, they may not. They might prefer a smaller city, but historically people generally go straight to Sydney.
Yep.
But what I'm hearing from locals in Sydney is that there is this trend of moving more regional as well. They're trying to get this high-speed rail up to Newcastle going in New South Wales. And so if that happens, there will be a lot more accessibility for people to live in regional areas.
Yep.
The government's also, Australia-wide, one of their policies is to incentivise regional because the cities are just getting too congested now. Right. I mean, for, overseas standards, we're very sparse, right? Or sparse. But for Australian standards, we're getting cooped up and, we're not used to it. And it's going to take some time for people to get used to that. Having said that, the governments are still trying to incentivise, kind of moving people in a city, to save on infrastructure spending and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So there is this, I think in New South Wales, we're going to see more people moving into sort of like the outer skirts of Sydney. But in terms of price, I think you're right. I think it will stagnate. I don't think it'll plummet. I don't think I don't think anything in Australia is going to plummet anytime soon. The economy's strong, immigration's strong, population's strong. We're going to hopefully see some decrease in the interest rate. So the buyer activity will keep increasing. So I think you're right. I think Sydney's pretty sound. And yeah, I think for investment, that one thing I read the other day, and I totally agree with this, is that for investment between 600 and 700 to 800 is really where you want to be.
Yep.
Like that's the sweet spot, because if you're getting up around the millions, the chances of that doubling in the next 20 years is low. Whereas if you're buying around that kind of, that price point, then you're going to make decent money. Yeah. So even if you've got the borrowing capacity to borrow $1 million, like, I can't speak for what the brokers recommend, but like from an investment research point of view, keeping it to that sort of price range. Yeah. So in terms of Sydney, for that reason, inner Sydney, it's not a good investment in my opinion, but there are still opportunities there, I think, and that's one we'll be looking at this year.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Melbourne.
So Melbourne's, obviously very depressed at the moment. I just can't even believe you can get a house down there for, nearly 700,000, 750. It's a bit of a funny one because their election's not until the end of next year.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people, the political climate there is scaring off a lot of investors. It's a bit unpredictable what they're going to do. So I think as an investor for myself, I would be happy to go in there knowing at the moment in my opinion, it's a good investment because you're not competing with everybody else. Like Queensland is booming and you're competing with every other investor, every other homeowner it's almost like people get FOMO. It's always the way. People get FOMO. They want to get into the industry, like they want to get into the market that they hear on the media, etc. But what's happening is, and the same thing's in Perth, is that pretty much if you're going to buy an established property, it's $50,000 over the asking price is what it sells for.
Yep.
So if you go into Melbourne, because you're not competing with everybody, you can negotiate a lower price, and there's incentives, and the government's released first homeowner incentives, they've released stamp duty incentives, so they are wanting to stimulate the economy, like the building and the property industry down there. So I think it's a good investment. I don't think it's going to pick up rapidly. I think it'll either keep declining. Well, it declined by 0.06% last month, which is still significant. So it's still quite a significant decline. So I think it will keep declining. But when it starts to stagnate, I think that's when we'll go in and have a look around. Yeah. So we're already working towards getting some stuff happening in Melbourne for when it does pick up. But it's still a good investment, because if you're not overpaying for a price, that's like a whole year of capital growth right there.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think again, this is just from what I can see, I think it'll probably decline a little bit more this year.
Yeah.
Potentially at the start of next year, I'm hoping that the left-wing government gets voted out.
Yeah, I have a feeling you might.
And I guess my attitude right now is, if let's just say hypothetically, end of next year, Labor's voted out, Liberals are in, I can almost promise every house we'll be recommending will be in Melbourne.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It just becomes a no-brainer straight away. But right now, you're right. The risk is
it's a tricky one.
Yes,
it's unprecedented in Melbourne.
Well,
never seen a climate like this in Melbourne.
It's once again, it's unfortunately all to do with the top-down government. Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of people, when it comes to politics, it's very dry and boring. But when you sort of get how impactful it actually is on your day-to-day, and when you sort of understand the main differences between what they're all trying to do, because that's one thing we're not taught in schools, or we're not taught generally, is like, what's the difference between left and right wing? Like, we're not taught this.
No.
And if we are, it's generally a biased answer.
Yes.
Or a spin to make you believe it's something that it's not. But it is so freaking impactful.
Yeah, it is.
It's critical.
I think if you're an investor, either pay someone like us to do it for you, or be aware of this stuff. Yeah. Like, you have to be aware of what's going on. Yeah. And it's not hard. You just Google it, and it's anyone can research. In my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. So right now, Brisbane is looking like it's well and truly one of the strongest markets.
Definitely. Yeah, it's still booming. Adelaide performed the best last month, which actually is surprising to me. And then Perth was next, and then Brisbane. Yep. So, median house price of $890,000 in Brisbane. I was looking at, do you remember Ormeau? Yep. It's almost $1 million.
Yeah.
To buy an Ormeau. Yeah. And Ormeau's in the middle of Brisbane and Queensland. It's not even... Coast, I'm just so... it's insane.
My parents have one there.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so my parents have several.
A
few over there as well. Yeah. It's just... Look, it's Ormeau's one of those ones where when I first saw it, I was like, well, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Halfway between Brisbane and the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
Catching the urban sprawl from South Logan and then north. It's just 30 years.
Yeah.
No.
It's so good. The thing I love about Brisbane is they've always been very forward thinking with their transport infrastructure. They're very good at they cope with population growth very well because they're always so forward thinking in their transport and their infrastructure. So Brisbane's I just see it getting better and better, to be honest. They've got the Olympics in 2032, so that's going to bring in more funding, more infrastructure. Often when the Olympics go, there's vacancy increases and that kind of thing. So that's obviously something that people need to be aware of, but it only applies to certain locations.
Yeah,
it's not an across the board thing.
Of course. Yeah.
So if you are buying, into these areas where they're pumping Olympic funding into, that's something to be aware of. But we don't recommend those kind of areas. So so Brisbane's really strong. I don't see it changing anytime soon. I think in terms of people are moving there because of lifestyle choices. It's the Sunshine Coast. It's the sunny city. I love Brisbane personally. I spent some time over there, so I know the city well. It would be my second pick for somewhere to live in Australia, definitely.
Oh yeah, me too, definitely.
Yeah.
And it's obviously very similar to WA.
Yes.
A lot of ways.
The only thing I'll say about Brisbane is there is a big movement of investment happening in Townsville, Cairns, Mackay.
Yeah.
I'm skeptical of those areas. And I think they're flooded now. I think they're, especially because they're regional. I know they're big regional centres and they're very economically diverse, which is good, but they're still regional. So I would always recommend, if you can, stay in the metro area. And and there's just so much buyer activity around those areas that it's. Yeah, you're just overpaying now. It's
and obviously the competition isn't necessarily a good thing when you are buying.
Yes,
which is obviously
want to avoid
competition that because it means that obviously there's high demand, but you don't want to be fighting to get in.
And this is another reason I love research so much, is because if you do the research properly, you can figure out where these areas are before the huge demand comes in. So ideally, you want to get in before it becomes a hotspot, and that's really what my job is.
Yeah.
To find those areas for our clients.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's because there are, again, a couple of competitors who on the East Coast who just do hotspots. You know, and so they're really looking for that kind of flash in the pan, you know, makes 20% growth in 1 year, and then the clients, it does nothing now for 9 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which I don't think
that's
is
a strategy.
It is. I don't think it's good for the average punter.
No.
But I know you, like, you always want to get in before that stuff regardless.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, it depends on what your strategy is. If you're someone who is happy to watch the market and happy to go in and get out and get your growth and get out, perfect. Go into a hotspot.
100%.
Do it. Most people want to set and forget, and that's where you want to get in early. You know, make your growth in that first year or two and then leave it.
Yeah.
Your cash flow won't change too much, you know, during that period. One of the problems with buying in a hotspot is you're getting high rents, high yields. That's what you do your budget on. And then when the hotspot peters off, you then got cash flow issues because you've done your budget on that high yield. So again, you want something that's, I mean, as an investor myself, I'm not a real hotspot kind of person. I'd rather go into a warm spot and just
longevity and consistency over time. Yeah, 100%.
Exactly.
Totally agree.
So that's where Brisbane's at.
And then we've got Perth.
Yeah, so Perth was second.
Yep.
So what did we have? I think we had 0.6. So I think it was 0.6% growth.
That's the quarter.
Or was it 0.4? It's 0.4%. No, sorry, for the month. Yeah, that was last month. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
It's sort of rents increased quite significantly. So it went from $650 a week to $675 now. So we're seeing that, you know, we've still got really strong population growth. Economy is still performing really well. Again, we've got population growth. Mineral houses being built. It's just going to keep going. It's obviously not at the same rate that we were getting last year. I think, it's come off the boil slightly, but, kudos to you because you said to me that Perth will keep going, and it definitely will. It definitely will keep going this year. And there's definitely still lots of good opportunities here. Yeah. And I feel like Motivate's in a really unique position because there aren't many of these kind of companies in WA, and we have really strong contacts, really strong we know where to go, and we've got the buying power to do it for our clients.
We do now.
So,
and we've got really good relationships with everybody because we're doing the right thing. Yeah,
and we've got a really good reputation, which also helps. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
And then Adelaide is very interesting too. So what's going on?
Adelaide's very interesting. So historically, Adelaide's not one that I would have considered for capital growth. It's definitely one I would have considered for cash flow. So Adelaide's a very transient city because people can do their immigration points in the city. So if you go to a different city, if you're coming in as a new immigrant and you're getting your points up to get your PR or your citizenship, you would have to go regional, but they allow you to do it in the city in Adelaide. So what happens is it's a very transient city. So rentals there's very high yields in Adelaide. So I lived in Adelaide in 2018, 2019, and that was something that struck me is that it's actually way cheaper to buy than to rent in Adelaide. So I always thought if I ever invested in Adelaide, it would be for cash flow, not so much for capital growth. They're a very small city. The thing that concerns me about Adelaide, I think there's really good opportunities, and we have put some clients into the areas, but we're very, very selective that actually don't have a current transport plan, which is concerning for me because they're not used to coping with these big population increases. So I think you have to be careful in Adelaide. I think it's a really good opportunity, but I do think you have to be really careful in where you're investing. They're having there's a big hotspot sort of to the northeast, and they're having waterways infrastructure struggles at the moment because they just purely don't have the construction power. They're just not. It's like a
big town.
It's a big town. Yeah. I mean, Adelaide's amazing. Like, it's a great place to live. It's very, the Adelaide people themselves are very lifestyle orientated. They're very get out and do stuff. Wine and food is amazing there. But yeah, it's just it's one to watch, definitely. I'd like to see them have a solid infrastructure plan. Before we jump in fully. Yeah.
And it's good too, because I mean, a lot of clients that we have been getting there, like we are diversifying as well. Because as much as these markets are, there may be stronger markets, like we don't want to overdo it in any market.
Well, I think Adelaide's a really strong market. I think it's a good one to go into, but again, you just have to be careful where you go. And you have to do your research. It's the same with anywhere. Like anywhere you invest, you can make money. You just have to be selective where you go.
Yeah.
Where the research comes in.
I mean, I do know a couple of multimillionaires who've made it all in Karratha.
Yeah.
So you can do it. But
you can do it.
Wouldn't recommend it.
No.
Do it. Yeah,
but and you also need the right strategy. Yeah. And if you're new to investing and you don't know what that means, then you need to get some help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing that I'm closely monitoring is, again, the land cycles. Only because, and without sounding like a crazy person, obviously there's no guarantees. To assume that just because it happened in the past, to say that it's definitely going to happen in the future, I think you're lying to yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
However, there are very consistent patterns based on overall sentiment.
Yeah. And the land cycle you're speaking about, the 18.6 year one, is it's 200 years worth of evidence for this one.
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying, like healthy skepticism in investing is a good thing, but there's also, you can use it as a tool.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's one tool of many.
Yeah.
And this is where I think, using where the hotspotting guys are, that's another tool. The empirical method, that's a tool. With the different platforms we're using between CoreLogic and Microburbs and all again, these are all tools to our advantage and our clients' advantage. But when we look at the patterns, and that's what I'm more interested in, is the actual pattern, because the patterns themselves are very replicable.
Yes.
Because again, when you have a major boom, you get through that point of the winner's curse where the market's just way too hot. Like we always have a correction.
Yes.
And you can't. It's inevitable. And the reason being is because as the market moves upwards, as soon as that one thing that happens that causes the cascade of people freaking out, everyone pulls the money from the market and drops. And it's just like that. It's human psychology.
Yes.
But generally speaking, what happened last time was just prior to the GFC. If you remember, we went through the mining boom, right? So we went from $150,000 to $450 in 5 years, from 2002 to 2007 here in Perth. Now we hit around that sort of 450, punching almost 500 grand. For context, Sydney was sitting around the same point. 2010, so just post GFC, Sydney was sitting around 609, and they doubled in price. And so, because we are now approaching that part of the market where, we have been booming very strong in Perth and Brisbane, and nationally we've been booming since COVID. What I'm expecting, and what I've been expecting over the last couple of years, is Melbourne and Sydney to come down and get a lot closer to the national media.
Yeah.
Perth and Brisbane ramp up and get really close to the national media.
Yeah. Yep.
When we're at that point where the prices are pretty much the same across the board, that's generally when the cycle then starts. Resets itself.
Yeah, gotcha.
Major recession, and then we reset. We start again.
Yep.
Melbourne, Sydney, generally double, and then mid-cycle slow down.
Yeah.
Following decade, Perth and Brisbane ramp up.
Yeah.
So in line with that, and again, this is a tool. In line with that, with where Perth and Brisbane are, there's not, while there are still legs in it, it's not the same as it was, say, 2 years ago, investing at the bottom of the cycle versus now. So I'd say we're probably a good sort of halfway up the upswing.
Yeah.
Now, halfway up the upswing means there's still a good, I would say, from the median house price today, that 800 grand mark, I reckon we'll still hit $1 million.
Yeah.
Over the next couple of years.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing that happened in Sydney. Everyone was like, nah, it's got to cool off. And we're, 2 or 3 years later, we're saying, no, it's got to cool off sometime. And it just didn't. So, yeah.
And I think now that the interest rates are going to start sort of, like now that the overall economy since COVID has almost corrected itself.
It's come back into range,
I think now we're going to see Sydney just come down a little bit.
Yeah.
Brisbane, Perth sort of catch up.
Yeah.
And then we will very likely, between now and 2030, I'm expecting to have a full economic collapse.
Yeah.
Again, what happens, right?
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that Perth's property prices collapse, because it doesn't do that, right?
No.
It's just the overall economy. But once again, once that happens.
But I mean, when the economy collapsed in GFC, like Perth, it was like a blip on the radar for Perth.
It's just.
Yeah. I I think was it yourself or someone was saying that Perth has its own, like we may as well be our own sort of country essentially. Like we're very unique and we're very
we are very insulated from the rest of the world, and even for a lot of the rest of the country, because again we've got we're very heavily resource backed, and when you think about WA as being its own country, there is an argument economically that we are, like, when you think about the overall economy between health, all the different industries, we almost are in a way. But because of that, when you do have things like, for example, economic collapses or certain negative economic policies around the world, like it doesn't really impact Perth the way it would, say, closer cities to that economy.
Yes. Yeah.
But the other part of this as well is the fact that every city is just doing its own thing regardless.
Yes.
So Sydney, when the GFC happened, didn't really move a whole lot. As soon as the GFC was over, they doubled in price because, again, the cycle just reset. Because that's what happens when we have the major recession. But interestingly, Perth, as we sort of hit that point where we kind of catch up to the national median, Sydney kind of comes down, and that's why I think the national median is a really good metric, because it's like the cities that are higher are getting pulled down, the cities that are below are getting pulled up. So if there's a little cheat sheet of where to go, we want to go to the more affordable cities and cheaper cities because they're ramping upwards.
Definitely.
Not doing that irresponsibly, but just in general.
Yeah.
But I can see some form of major recession. I'm hoping to God it's not a global war, which could be. When we get through and the market resets, it's pretty much only Melbourne and Sydney.
Yeah.
And it's just full tilt. Let's go.
Yeah.
Markets double.
Yep.
Mid-cycle slowdown.
Yep.
Then it's Perth and Brisbane again.
Yep.
And it's like we really should be, over that sort of 18.6 year average, there are really 4 distinct phases where you should be doubling your money when you get into the right cities and time it right.
Yeah.
So between that first expansion, the mid-cycle slowdown, second expansion, major recession.
Yeah.
And this is all Warren Buffett's been doing for 50 odd years.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So it's pretty exciting because it's again, I only know what I know. And while I am looking at, a lot of different stuff, having someone like you behind the scenes, with the boots on the ground, it's actually making this better because it's like we've got different skill sets.
Yes, between the two of us, we've got very good overview.
And now it's getting to a point where it's like this is actually becoming way better for everybody.
Yeah.
Which is very exciting for me.
I know, it's like so exciting.
We're just this is just improving. But no, I'm very excited. We've got some cool stuff happening. We won't tell anyone right now, but we've got some cool stuff
We've got some cool stuff.
Easy, Mugs.
Yeah, awesome.
But anything else you think is worth it?
No, I think we've covered a lot today.
We have.
I think, it'll be good for the listeners to, see what's happening. And I think I'm very proud of Motivate and yourself and our commitment to our clients and the industry as well.
Yeah.
I think it's exciting to see what's going to happen.
Yeah. No, we've got some big stuff happening.
Yeah.
And like I said at the beginning, all we got to focus on is doing the right thing and just being, the example of what we want to see out there.
Yeah.
Which we are.
And I think that's the difference is I know everyone you employ, it's about the client experience and it's about, because at the end of the day, if you don't have clients, you don't have a business. And it's not just about that. Having worked in the industry and seeing businesses that are happy to throw their clients into something that's not in their best interest, I'm just not willing to do that. I can't. I actually used to lose sleep over it, because it's not in my nature to do that. So and I know you're the same. So
it doesn't work.
No.
And like this, we can do this the right way and still make money.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's it should be that way, even though the industry is not set up to be that way. But we're on the right track.
Absolutely.
But no, thanks for coming, Mark.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you.
You too.